Right, hello and welcome to part 3 of my series on making a jumper, a very simple jumper. Now, you will notice there's already some knitting on the machine, and that's because we're making the front. And actually, the first sort of 80 or so rows of the front are exactly the same as the back. So if I show you what's happening in the pattern, and I'll show you what I've already done. So the front it says, follow steps 1 and 2 as for the back with the carriage on the right. So steps 1 and 2 was our 112 stitches and doing our ribbing, and then work 80 rows. Okay, so I've done that. You can see that the row counter is saying 80, and I've got to the point where I've got to mark the rows for the armholes just like I did before. So I will do that, and then we will carry on. So let's have a look and see. Let's get some waste yarn in and put in the markers. So here's row number 81. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to hang a little marker on there, like that, and we'll go past that part of it, and then we'll go and mark the other row, and then we'll check the instructions and see what we have to do. So let me just put this other marker in. There we go, that's row 81 done. I'm just going to take my jumper off because it keeps on getting caught in the needles. You should never machine knit wearing knitwear, because otherwise you have a tendency to knit your own knitwear into whatever you're knitting. Now then, I'm going to hang some weights on the edges. Okay. And I'll leave it pointing in this way because the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to have to knit a whole bunch of rows. Now on the back you just knitted straight up to 146 rows, but on the front what we're going to do is we're going to work 42 rows up to 122 total. So I'm just going to knit until we get to 122. Right then, now we've got to 122 rows, and this is where we have to start shaping the front of the neck. Okay, so what it says here, it's very clear. It says shape the neck, carriage on right, which it is, thread the centre 24 stitches to waste yarn with 44 stitches either side. So the centre 24 stitches. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to thread up the waste yarn into the yarn tensioner, because that is a massive pain and I don't need to do it. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take the main yarn out of the carriage, and I'm going to leave it threaded up, and I'm going to leave it hanging over the edge of the machine like that. Okay, and what that means is that when I come to do the right hand side of the neck, I won't have to rejoin the yarn in, but I've got to thread the centre 22 stitches into waste yarn. Okay, so the way that works is I've got to put everything apart from the centre 22 stitches into hold position. So I'm going to go and find the centre 22, which is up to 11 on either side, and then let's have a look. There we go, up to 11 on either side. So with a bit of luck, there should now be 22 stitches here. Let's have a check and see. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Lovely. Everything else goes into hold position like this, and that means that they won't knit when the carriage goes past. Okay, so we're going to do this on both sides, and we've just got the centre 22 stitches that we are going to knit with waste yarn. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just put some waste yarn into the carriage. Okay, and I'm going to knit it through a few times with waste yarn. Only 6 rows should do it. So what I've got to do first is I've got to find my waste yarn, which I have put somewhere. Here it is, down here. Right, you can tell you're getting old. They make noises when you bend down. So here's my waste yarn. Okay, now I'll put it on the back there, and I will get plenty of yarn off it. Okay, and I'm going to thread up my carriage with the waste yarn, and I'm going to bring it through and across, such that I'm going to hand tension it. So I'm going to use my hand as the tension mast, not the tension mast, if you see what I mean, which is a bit tricky, but it does work like that. It's particularly tricky as if you are doing it with the camera. Now, what you can see is that these two stitches here have actually dropped. They didn't do it properly, which happens sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix that. That's a good example of something which can go wrong sometimes. So I'll show me fixing it. Now, it may well be that in fixing one of the stitches, I end up picking out, undoing another stitch, which I'll then have to manually reknit. But that's not a problem. So I'll actually deliberately pull these stitches out like that to give myself a bigger loop to work with. Okay, like so. Now then, if I pick up this stitch and I can put it back on the needle like so, and then I'll pick up this stitch. Now again, I'm going to have to unpick it, and you'll notice I've now got a couple of dropped stitches with a couple of loops in them, and that's fine. I'm just going to pull this through and get the needle through as much of the yarn as I can and get that back on the needle like that. Okay, so you'll notice I've got a couple of loops here. So this loop here needs to get knitted through this stitch, which I shall do manually like so. There we are. And then this loop here needs to go through both needles. So again, I shall knit it through manually. Okay, which I'll do one at a time. Oops. So this one goes through first, followed by this one, and we're back where we should be. And then this loop here is sulking a bit. And as I say, these things do happen, and you've got to expect it to happen at least once when you use a knitting machine. Sometimes they go perfectly, sometimes they don't. Okay, so now I'm going to knit this waste yarn through the two stitches that I missed, this one and this one. And now I'm back where I should be. Now I need to knit 6 rows of waste yarn, and I'm going to hang some weights here to make sure they actually knit through properly. Okay, so I'll hang a weight here, and I'll hang a weight here. Okay, and we'll knit some 6 rows of waste yarn. Now, this is obviously much slower and more annoying than doing it with the tension mast. However, given that I've only got one tension mast. Now that's 4. So I'll do a couple more. And there we go. So now I've knitted this central bit off on waste yarn. Now, as always, I want to cut a nice short end of yarn so that I have so that I am not going to snag it on something, like so. And then I can remove my waste yarn. Oops, properly cut it. I can remove my waste yarn, okay, and then I can take these central stitches off. So I'm going to take these central stitches off, like so. In fact, what I'll do is I'll use the carriage to do it, like that, okay, and these stitches are now pulled off, and I'm just going to tuck them down underneath so they are out of the way. They're not going to get in anyone's way. Okay, now then, what I have to do now is I've got to knit up here. I've got to knit the shoulder. Now, in all that shenanigans, I've actually tripped the row counter a couple of times, so I'm going to at least partially reset the row counter, and it says, decrease 1 stitch at the neck edge every row 11 times until 33 stitches remain, and then work 13 rows even, total 146 rows. So I need to reset this to 122 rows, and then I can, there we go, 122 rows, and now I can do my decreasing. Now to do decreasing, I'm just going to do a very simple single stitch decrease. Now you remember I didn't break my yarn, so I can actually rethread my carriage with the original yarn, and then I can carry on. So here's me rethreading my carriage. Okay, I'm going to rehang the weights on the right hand side where I'm going to do my decreasing, and if you remember I have to do it 11 times. Okay, so 11 times I'm decreasing at this edge. All right, now before I can knit anything, I'm going to have to push these needles back into working position like that, so they will pick up. Okay, and I'll do 1. Okay, whoops. Now, can you see I've accidentally left these in working position? So I'm just going to take them out again and then retension my yarn mast. And now, so I've got to decrease stitches, which I will show you how to do just as soon as I have tensioned my yarn mast properly. There we go. These are now out of work and we are ready to go. Okay, so decreasing a stitch, all I do, let me get my camera in nicely. There we go. All I do is I take a stitch onto the transfer tool and I transfer it across around the outside of the sinker plates onto the next stitch across, and that is number 1 done. And I've got to do this 11 times, so I've done it once, here's twice. Okay, this is 3 times, and I shall fast forward from now and you can see me at the end. Need to make sure you go past the row counter every time to make sure it trips. Okay, and again I'm going to check the row counter. Now then, let's have a look and see. My row counter reads 133 and I finished it at 122, so that should be 11. Let's have another check and see. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 33. Magnificent. Now, all I need to do now, it says on the instructions, is I need to work 13 rows even until 146 rows. Okay, so I'm going to rehang this and I'm going to work 13 rows even, making sure I go past the row counter each time. "13 rows, 146 in total. So we've now got to the point where this right hand shoulder is ready. So we are now going to take this right hand shoulder off on our waste yarn, just like we did for the centre, and then we'll have to go and do exactly the same to the other side. So let me just take this off on waste yarn. Now this time I am going to break the yarn because I have to rejoin it on the other side anyway. So I'm going to break the yarn like so. Okay, I'm going to pull the yarn end down like that and leave it, and then I'm going to thread up with some waste yarn, and manually tensioning it I shall do 6 rows and then cut. Okay, so let's make sure this yarn doesn't in any way get in the way. There we are, and that's done it properly. There we go, 6 rows have been done. That's on waste yarn, that's ready to come off. Now actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on the machine for the moment, because it will help balance up the other side of the front as I do it. So for the other side of the front I need to do exactly the same thing, but this time I'm reversing the shaping. So what I'll do is I'll just do it and I'll fast forward through it, and you can see. By the way, can you see I'm putting my my stitches into holding position so that they will then stay on the machine but not get knitted off. Okay, so to do that, what I'm going to do, let's get the camera over here again, and I'll get it set up and then I'll just crack on with it. Now remember I need to do 11 times. Okay, now this time I want to actually completely reverse it. So I want to have the carriage starting entirely on this side. I want to reset it to 122 like we did before. Just check it was 122. Yep. Then I'm going to knit until the knit and decrease, knit and decrease, knit and decrease until it reads 133, and then knit through. So pull these needles back so they will in fact catch and knit like that. So these will now all catch and knit. Okay, and we will do 1 and then decrease. At this point, I am actually going to re-thread with waste yarn because I've actually, the next thing I've got to do is to knit the sleeve, so I may as well be threaded up with waste yarn for that. Now I'm going to cut a good long length of yarn, or break a good long length of yarn, so that I have got plenty to sew the shoulders up with. Always at the end of it you need a good long length of yarn. Even if you end up chopping it off and discarding it, it just means that you aren't caught short having to try and weave in a new piece of yarn. Okay, so I'm just going to tie that off like so. Okay, and then I will thread up with waste yarn, and I shall be back in a second. Right, here we are back again, and I shall just thread up with waste yarn and knit 6 rows through. And there we go, 1 jumper front, which is done. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my carriage to knit off everything. That's so return everything back. So with no yarn on it, it'll just make the knitting fall off. And then that'll be the back done. The front, sorry, done. And there we go. Next time I shall see you for the arms. Okay, so don't forget to like and subscribe, as they say, and also if you are interested in this, please feel free to sign up to my Patreon and help me carry on making stuff like this. Thank you very much. Goodbye.